Okay, now after we have heard quite a lot about wilderness, I will now give you a brief insight into another European initiative which is closely linked to the wilderness topic as well. And it is about the UNESCO Natural World Heritage nomination, Primeval Beech Forests of the Carpathians and other regions of Europe, which is in the process of revision right now. Just briefly to me and our company, I'm working for ACO Institute of Ecology in Klagenfurt, and we are working in conservation for almost 20 years, and we were in charge of coordinating this beech forest process, which I will present in the next few minutes. And primeval beech forests are endangered. We heard a lot about the logging, about development, protection of wilderness, and of the originally 91 million hectare of beech forests in Europe, before man started to shape the ecosystems, we come down to now approximately 90,000 hectares of really primeval beech forests in Europe. And beech forests ecosystems are typical European ecosystem. So there is now a large initiative to preserve these last remnants of primeval and ancient beech forests at a European scale. Currently there is a process going on to inscribe the last remnants across Europe into the World Heritage List under criterion 9, which means preserve outstanding examples representing significant ongoing ecological and biological processes in the evolution and the development of terrestrial freshwater, coastal, marine ecosystems and communities of plants and animals. So this is the natural process link to UNESCO. Outstanding universal value you have to define for inscription as a UNESCO World Heritage Site is, in this case, that the proposed World Heritage Site is a showcase for the postglacial expansion process through a series of sites that includes some of the glacial refuge areas and demonstrates the most natural and undisturbed development history of European beech forest ecosystems. And so the main intention of this initiative is to give beech as the typical European forest ecosystem a platform by preserving the last remnants of these patches that are still present across Europe. And a further objective is to link or to create also a European network, specifically with a very specific focus on this beech forest network, because you have some very well preserved, you have highly endangered sites, for example, in Eastern Europe, as we heard before. So there is this very ambitious process. So on this slide I try to link this nomination also to the debate here. And the approach is what we heard yesterday as this old wilderness approach to preserve really what is still left. And there has been a very strictly representative site selection process which took more than 2 years to really find the best spots for this nomination. And the intention is to preserve and show the natural dynamics of a specific ecosystem on a European level. And so there is this clearly focused objective or vision on Fagus sylvatica ecosystems. And at the moment this is an effort of 12 European countries. I will refer to this a little bit later. And it is also facing the challenge of protecting natural dynamics in more or less static sites in a static system of UNESCO World Heritage. And just to give you a better impression of what I'm talking about, I have this figure here which is basically key and explains what is it all about. So we were talking about dealing with invasive species, invasive alien species. So now, for us, it's also an invasive species, which is the key topic. It's just not a foreign invasive species. So here you see the paths of, how the beech moved after the last ice age, and you have selected refuge areas in northern Spain, here in Italy, and in the Balkan. And then it started to spread across Europe, and it's still in the process of expansion towards north, like Sweden. And given this migration processes, there are defined different we call it beech forest regions, which have certain floristic, faunistic characteristics to share, and also genetic similarity, depending on from which glacial refuge they started to colonize Europe. So what you see here is that this is more or less a European heritage. So, and it's, to describe this process, it's not enough to just pick one or two sites somewhere, but to give a clear picture. And this was also the basis for the selection process, to get a representative picture of this process by selecting good showcases also to illustrate this process. This process I'm talking about has a history of more than 10 years and started in 2007 with the subscription of the World Heritage Site Primeval Beech Forests of the Carpathians, which included Slovakia and Ukraine. We heard about the challenges Slovakia is facing at the moment. And in 2011, there was an extension by 5 component parks in Germany. But there was also the recommendation on behalf of IUCN that only by extending to Germany, this does not give a comprehensive picture, a comprehensive or large picture, and there was a call to define a finite list of sites which is able to give a complete picture. That was the starting point for a European screening process, which was initiated by Germany. This took place in 2012 to 2014, where a huge selection process took place, looking for potential sites, well-suited sites across Europe, to come up with a list of potential sites. And from 2014 to 2016, the nomination process itself started and was carried out, culminating with the submission of the nomination to UNESCO in February last year. And also in last year, the evaluation by IUCN took place in fall. And this year, it will be, IUCN will prepare its recommendation to UNESCO, and in June in Krakow, there will be the final decision about this process. What is really interesting about this process is that in the past 10 years it has created a very enthusiastic and very large movement which across more than 10 countries where experts, protected areas, state administrations started to interact and discuss this whole process. And there is a strong commitment from many countries, or all of the participating countries, to follow with this World Heritage nomination, which is quite unique in the history of UNESCO because there has never been a nomination of this size and this complexity, which represents a lot of challenges, both for IUC and for evaluation, also for UNESCO to really get a complete picture of this nomination. So I printed its nomination dossier of 5 to 7 centimeters. So, and what you can see here is the final list of sites which finally participated in this nomination. And as you can see here, the sites stretch from central Spain over southern Italy, the Balkan, the Carpathians, further up north, Belgium, Germany, and in green these are the sites that are in the existing World Heritage site, and the blue dots represent the additional sites. Poland, as mentioned before, left the process in 2016, I think. Also due to these political changes we already heard before. And at the moment all the parties are really committed, but this is a very dynamic environment to keep together more than 12 states. And there are also many other countries which somehow left the process before, during this screening process. So I think Montenegro, for instance, they left the process before the between the tentative list and the final nomination. And this also shows that this is not only a conservationist project, or not only from a conservation point of view influenced, but also from a lot of different other levels, like commitment of states, individual political directions, and this is the final result. What you can see here, just to give you an imagination of the scale and the scope, there are 63 new sites which should be added to the existing nominations, which are more than 60,000 hectares of primal and Asian beech forest, which does not really show the, just for an explanation, this number is only really the core zone. So if you have a national park of 2,000 hectares or 10,000 hectares and you have patches of beech forest, of primeval beech forests of 250 hectares inside, it shows up with 250 hectares here, because there was the explicit decision to only include really the best sites that really clearly illustrate this process. What you cannot see here is that these 60,000 hectares are surrounded by more than 200,000 hectares of buffer zones, which are mostly managed national parks, nature reserves, many of them with non-intervention zones around. So the actual site is about 60,000 hectares, and the total, including buffer zones, would be close to 300,000 hectares. And this shows the results of this preliminary list that was elaborated in the screening process, where potential sites were selected. And of the sites selected, this small portion was inscribed in 2007. This part was inscribed with the German extension. This would be the proposed extension, and this is the section of the areas or countries that did not participate. So with this extension there would be coverage of, if we go here to the area, of about 80% of what was considered the best sites in Europe. So this would give quite a clear picture. Now I just want to present just a few information of this complex and long process. Criteria for selection were basically stand, age and structure, size, which we considered 100 hectare in western parts and 500 hectare in eastern parts, just for the core parts. The difference is easy to explain because in western parts of Europe, if you put a threshold of 500 or 1,000 hectares of primal forest, you have a screening process that is finished very quickly. And furthermore, it was the basic criteria was that all component parts must show a full spectrum of the ecological development phases, referring to the beech forest ecosystem. And then another important criterion was the time of non-intervention, the protection status, which should be was considered to be IUCN category 1 or 2, but definitely non-intervention. And the ecological representativeness to these beech forest regions I presented before. And this ended with the Vienna shortlist of 64 suitable sites which were then integrated in the continuing process. And then, I shortly explained before, the additional aspects like commitment of state parties, appropriateness of protection status, minimum size buffer zones, which were taken into account in the continuing process. And just a brief outlook to the dealing with management issues in the nominated property. Basically, the core zones will be integrated into large protected areas where there's strict, and so the nominated properties have a strict non-intervention regime where really nothing is done. And they are surrounded by large buffer zones, which are managed according usually to the category, like category 2, and managed very extensively or not at all. And it was an important major challenge to find the right way between eastern and western parts, because in the western parts you have smaller areas which are well protected, usually there is a lot of management experience, also they are well investigated, but small. And in the eastern parts you have large, often sometimes pristine areas, but which are more threatened and are facing more immediate threats, like we heard in Slovakia, but also currently in Romania. So this is just illustrate the challenge of the complete process. And the management of the World Heritage would also remain within the existing protected area managements which are in place in the different countries. And additionally, it is planned to establish a joint management committee which is already in place for the existing 3 countries and which should be further developed and strengthened, and there will be a coordinator for the whole World Heritage Site, which will be full-time employed for coordinating the activities. And on the ground it is planned to establish working groups of different topics to integrate stakeholders at the local level. And as mentioned before, there were some questions about invasive aliens, species, park people, game management and all this. This is not an issue in this case, so just put it here to have it here. And conclusions is, what maybe is interesting is that this is an alternative way of supporting the idea and the picture, the image of wilderness by picking a few very prominent examples at the European level to push the idea. Then it is, you can, so what we are really proud of is that we had this large vision and that we finally brought it into one nomination with 12 countries in total. And now there's this critical phase of evaluation, because right now we have 12 countries together pushing into the same direction. But depending on the decision of UNESCO, if it is deferred or referred, we will, it is most probably that it will break apart, because there are changes in Romania, there is Poland already dropped out, so it is a very fragile current situation, and it will be very interesting what this year will bring to this initiative. And what maybe we can learn from it is also that, or what we intend to do with this is also to, for one specific ecosystem, to create a platform of exchange also between eastern and western parts. Therefore, the European Beech Forest Network was founded as an association last month to support this. And if successful, it would be a push for European perception, because if, for example, in Romania, the World Heritage sites will be clear-cut, and this will also endanger the World Heritage status of all the other countries that have shown their commitment into this. So this could also serve as a tool for raising public awareness and public attention and public pressure to these developments, because yeah. And so it should also improve the management standards and good practices in beech forest conservation within this network. So that was just a few brief flashlights of this complex 10-year lasting process, which is right at the end right now. And just to end with my presentation, I have just one more mini advertisement, because I'm already here and been here for 9 hours. We are currently preparing the European Parks Academy as capacity building program with short-term trainings in Austria, which will strongly focus on the practical implementation of international guidelines by asking the participants to bring practical case studies from the protected areas, from the everyday management, to discuss it with experts and groups to develop solutions for their individual problems. And this year we will have 2 modules, one on governance and one on effective financial management of protected areas. And it will take place in the second half of July. I have some brochures here, and that's enough of advertisement. And herewith I want to say thank you for listening to this, and I hope you got an impression about the idea of this really large European initiative. Thank you.
Thank you too.
The first question or comment?
Actually, just to add to it, on the Madness of Poland European Beech Forest Network, the website will go up in the next 3 weeks, and it will actually have the sites of the heritage site, all of 140 primeval beech forest sites in Europe. Now, Vlado, together with the new chairman of that network, Hannes Knapp, is developing criteria for these primeval beech forests, and they are very closely linked to the European Wilderness Quality Standard. And in fact, those two are very, very close together when it comes to human intervention, human interaction on the principles, wilderness principles. So there was a conscious effort by the Beech Forest Network to adapt the wilderness standards, big in size, obviously, because you're dealing with smaller sizes, but we saw there's also a lot of big ones in there. And so that is very closely linked to the whole wilderness procedure.
Yeah, thank you. Bernard?
Could you please give a close explication why at the moment this process is stuck, or what are the problems with ICN? Because obviously there have been some questions about the process raised, and what is exactly the problem?
This is something that even after some clarification requests remains a bit unclear. So Vicky Hasler from the Austrian Ministry and Hans Kuttner and some others also met in Gland with the IUCN representative, and it's still not fully clear. There are some questions regarding the outstanding universal value, about the size, about the buffer zones. So many technical questions which are to a large part already explained in this relatively complex nomination dossier. So it is not quite, as there is a big question mark for us. We have tried to answer all the, clarify all the remarks they made, resulting in a 30-page explanatory document which we submitted, I think, this week. Actually, the idea after the German acceptance was, or the message was, that this is only with the German extension, it does not reflect the full European perspective. So, but it was more or less agreed that, or accepted that the OUV, the outstanding universal value, is basically okay, or is accepted. So we looked for sites to have really the complete picture. And now there are some questions arise about the outstanding universal value, if we couldn't have a look at it otherwise. And so it was some basic questions which we expected or thought that were already clarified. Maybe it has to do with, because it was such a large nomination, and IUCN had to use 5 different evaluators to visit all the sites. That some other perspectives arise, and there is no one who saw all sites, and it is, from the scope, it's so huge that it's very tough to get really this clear picture. That is what we also try to rearrange, to get this clear, complete picture of the story behind the completeness of the process, and we hope that we could define it more precisely now. But
so it's more an institutional problem, not so much a problem of the content. Do I get it right?
May I add something?
Yeah.
I think this is also, let's say, a technical problem because if you read the guide, let's say, technical criteria for selection of cereal sites, I think the original idea was the cereal site like that you have few parts of the site in one country, tens of kilometers away. So this is something that is incomparable with any other proposal of history. It's quite difficult or challenging for the expert group to really visit all the sites and to understand if it is manageable. If it is, you can protect all these sites because they have really very different size. The large sites, there are no problems because they are covered by national parks, by large-scale protected areas, but there's also some small-scale parks that are quite fragile. And if you look at the map, some states decided at the beginning of the process they have offered to be a part of the cereal site. For example, Czech Republic, but we decided not to be a part of such a site because you spend a lot of your capacity by communicating with others, which helps on the one hand. And of course, I agree with Mike that it's something like an idea behind that you will have something like a coordinating body, coordinating the protection or management of all these cereal sites. But on the other hand, it's also quite demanding your capacity.
We should not forget, because we were involved with those evaluators, some of them only spent a few hours in some of those segments. So your analysis that they had 5 evaluators, some of them spent a day or 2 days, the other one 2-3 hours. I suspect gave a very not clear picture because some of them all stuff into their reports that other ones couldn't because there were only a few hours there. So that is also one issue that came up.
And it's just a really, I think, diverse nomination because you have completely different conditions in Romania than in Spain. Then there was a question about private property on this land in Austria. There was a question, why is it here nature reserve? Why is it here protected by national decree? Why is it there is a national park? So
I think we shouldn't forget that the UNESCO recognition is partially a politically driven process. And you know that Europe is definitely not a priority now, because if you count all together culture, mixture and natural heritage, then the majority of sites are in Europe. So definitely what UNESCO wants to see is proposals from other regions. This is also another aspect of the process. Another aspect is, if for example, I fully support this proposal because it helps us to protect some parts of beech forest, for example, in developing countries like Albania. It's good, but if one of these countries are unable to protect their part of the site, then the whole cereal site is a problem. It's a case also in Slovakia because 2 years ago I visited Poloniny, and there's also a part of this site, and I was informed by the Director General of Nature Conservation there in the site that they have big problems with foresters that are really responsible for the management of the site, and they are, as the Minister of the Environment, they don't have the power to keep the quality. So this is, as I said, I support it, but to be in expert shoes in this expert group, I would say I would have a lot of questions. For example, how do we be able to maintain it in such many countries?
And added to that law, Mike, you can confirm this, the participating countries are not going to pay for Central Secretariat. So that came up as well. There's no money for Central Secretariat, just like at the Carpathian Convention. You know, it's the same issue for many years. So if you don't have a Central Secretariat, who is supposed to enforce it?
Well, as far as my latest information is, there is it is secured for the first 12 years with changing responsibility of taking responsibility one country for 3 years and then switching to the next one, and that's secured for 4 years now, 4 periods. So that is the current status. I think this is as much as you, or as long as you can ensure such a management.
That's good.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mike. Sorry that I stole part of your discussion.
No problem.